Welcome! I decided to start putting a video series together more or less to track my progress for myself, and right now I'm at about flight number 20, but just to see my progression. And I'm going to explain a little bit of where I started and how I got to this point. But as we're getting set up for today, if you look here, I've got this awesome carrier that I got from Aviator. And this thing is great. It mounts, the paramotor mounts directly to it, very easy with a couple locking pins. You can pre-warm your engine while it's on this carrier. Holds it very secure. I drive with it on the carrier when I'm going short distances. Just a really nice tool. And as you can see, I'm using the carrier, strapping myself into the paramotor, lift it off my back, and we're good to go. Now I did my training with Aviator down in Dunnellon, Florida back in January. I believe I had 12 or 14 flights before I left the training. Came back to Tennessee within a couple weeks. I got off the ground and then the weather got bad. A couple flights here and there. Typically when I get out though, I do a few touch and goes, or I'll land completely and then take off. Only up until recently have I actually spent more than 20 minutes in the air. But what I like to do, I've got my wing set out. I get that set out. I look at the conditions, look at the windsock. I'm at the airport here, which is really nice on a Sunday morning because nobody is out. But on a no-wind day like today, I can really survey the situation, decide what direction I want to take off in. It really opens the door to quite a few options and a great opportunity to practice. Now I've got the Moster 185, which is a really nice motor. It fits my body just fine. I'm at about 205, and I'm really getting comfortable with this motor now. Initially it was heavy, it was awkward. I didn't know for sure how well I trusted this big fan on your back. And what I did to build more confidence with the motor is I spent an afternoon at home just with the motor on my back, and I was going up and down my driveway. Lean backs, letting it push me, getting comfortable. I've got to the point now where I can do full throttle in a lean back and it holds me up. And what that did for me was built tremendous confidence during my takeoffs now, that I can truly lean back while I'm running with the glider, about ready to lift me off the ground. So that is a very strong recommendation for anyone just starting out. Get comfortable with that motor on your back. Trust it. Trust your throttle response. Get used to what you can do while moving with that motor, and then transition to the wing. Now as I'm getting set here, if you've gone through the training, you know all these steps. They're very familiar to you. Being I'm at the airport, I do need to call in that I am launching. So what I call in is Monroe County traffic, one paramotor launching northwest side of runway, Monroe County traffic. And we don't have anyone in the actual office there, but basically what I'm doing is letting other pilots know that I am going to be launching. So as I'm getting set up here, my daughters were in the van recording. They take some very shifty video, but you'll see that up in the top right hand corner. That whole deep breath, take your time, and I like to use a little bit of throttle when I launch. What I find, especially when there's no wind, it gets me up to speed quick. My wing pulls up fast, stabilizes quickly, and I'm off the ground very fast. Now, this particular wing has 5 trim settings, and they recommend a neutral setting for no wind launching. And what I found today actually on this particular flight is putting it at the lowest setting. The wing came up quick and I was actually off the ground much faster. The wing speed was a little bit slower, but the lift was better, so I'm going to be trying that a little bit more often. So anyway, as we get up in the sky here, it is chilly out, so I want to get my gloves on as soon as I can, as soon as I feel comfortable taking my hands off the brakes. This area of flying is really nice. There is very little air traffic in this area. Now I am wearing a headset so that I can hear if there's any pilot traffic in the area. and that has been helpful a few times when I've been looking at landing and I'll hear somebody that they're coming in for a landing. So of course we're going to yield to any aircraft. Now, as we're flying around, I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience with the training, what brought me to this. A friend of mine about 10-12 years ago brought up the idea of powered paragliding. I didn't really have much knowledge on what that was. We looked it up. I got really interested in it back then. Just one of those things I kept putting off, and I brought it up over the years and we talked about it, but we just never did it. And finally it got to the point last summer where I said, hey, I'm going to do this. I booked my dates, paid the deposit, started making payments toward it. So I was committed. And Aviator was my top choice, mostly because of the information that was available. They seemed like a good group of people. They had a good program in place. It was about an 8-hour drive for me. So anyway, I could not have been happier than with Aviator. A great group of people. The family dynamic was amazing. Just so much camaraderie that was built, not only with fellow classmates but with instructors. I actually went down to visit about a month ago with my daughters so they could meet everybody. I mean, it's just a really cool program, and they really help build your confidence and help you get comfortable with what you're going to be doing. Now, I will admit, there's a lot of confidence when you're there doing flights at school with somebody talking in your ear. It was very intimidating my first flight, not just because I was by myself, but because I trained on the Mojo wing, Ozone Mojo, and I purchased a Spider 3. So my first flight solo was also on a new wing that I had never flown before. Very lightweight, very responsive wing. So I knew that my skills would improve fairly quickly where I'd be ready for the Spider 3. However, when I first started solo, I was not quite ready for the Spider 3. But all in all, it went pretty well. I did have a mishap on my second or third attempt solo. I was at my property. I own 12 acres, and I decided, hey, I'm going to try launching from this area. A little intimidating because of the tree line, and I actually, as I got the wing up, it pulled a little bit toward the trees. Instead of grabbing the brakes, I let off the throttle, and it kind of pulled me over, busted up a prop. Nothing too substantial. Definitely a good lesson was learned that I wasn't quite ready for that environment. So got back to the airport, and I've been there ever since. I feel like at this point I'm probably ready to tackle that flight again from my property. But it's a learning process. So with all of these flights, basically what I'm doing is I'm still training. I consider myself still in training. So as I'm flying right now, I am trying to target my landing spot. I go through the process of how would I grab my reserve if I needed it. I'm constantly looking up at my wing, just kind of looking at the characteristics of the wing as I change trim settings. What is the wing actually doing? How does it change my seating position? Working on weight transfer. The tip steering is very cool on this wing. It's very responsive. I prefer it over the brakes in the fact that it doesn't feel like it's straining to turn, it just turns. So I really like that. So the touch and goes, the landing, I'll do a full landing and then get my wing all set up and take off again. It's that kind of stuff that I want to become proficient at. I want to feel confident no matter where I'm at, that I can take off with the wing, that I can land. So I'm still in the learning stages. Very, very new to all of this. One thing I did do is I tied my brake lines up about 2 inches. I noticed the brake toggles, there's a lot of slack on the Spider 3, and I'm sure if you've gotten this wing or you've flown this, you've recognized that. And I'm not comfortable wrapping or anything like that. I just want to be able to grab the handles. Tying up 2 inches made a substantial difference. I might go up maybe another 1/2 inch or 1 inch more. As you can see, there's still quite a bit of slack in that line. So that's something you might want to consider depending on how long your arms are or or how the wing responds to you. But when I'm coming in for a landing, after tying up the toggles, I feel like I've got a lot more control. I can glide in, I can come to a stop much quicker than what I was dealing with before. Now, one thing I've been doing before I actually land is a quick flyby. I check the windsock. Since I'm at the airport, I look for any people or planes that might be, shifting around. I want to make sure that I can approach safely and confidently do the land when I'm ready for it. So I do a quick flyby. Everything looks pretty good this time. This is a good opportunity. I've got a nice, clear, grassy area up ahead where I can work on some low flying. And this is an area that is going pretty well. There's been a couple times I've gotten lower than I thought and I've had to throttle up. So I'm still working on that. Just nice even pressure, trusting the wing to hold me at that level. At this point it's either a little bit low or a little bit high, but it's coming along. Now, one thing you'll notice when I'm flying is if I'm holding the brakes, I'll reach up and grab the tip steer to make a turn instead of using the brakes. Like I said, I still feel more comfortable with the way the tip steer responds. I can pull brake pressure to turn, but it feels like I'm pulling quite a bit to get the same response that I can get from a tip steer, which is a very small movement. So combining the two, I've looked at the 2D steering. One of my instructors from Aviator recommended waiting until I get some more hours under my belt before I transition to a 2D steering. I guess there's a little bit more complexity to it, so I want to make sure it's something I'm comfortable with. But at this point I'm trying to do the brake toggles, and then I'll reach up with my finger and grab the tip steer, so it's a little bit of both. But so far so good. As you can see, the area I'm at is very beautiful. You got the Smoky Mountains in the distance. Lots of areas to land if I did have a motor out situation or some kind of a problem. A lot of open fields. So I definitely like this flying area. Now, another thing I'm trying to get comfortable with is altitude. So this particular flight I got up a little bit higher than I have in the past. And the few other times I've been out, it's been a little bit windier the higher I get, and I'm still not totally comfortable with the bouncing around. So I prefer to wait on that until my skill levels get a little bit higher. But this was a nice altitude. I think I'm probably about 1,800, 2,000 feet, and definitely good visibility from up here. Clear skies, you can see quite a bit off in the horizon, and there's their airport. It's right straight ahead, so I'm working my way back that way. Now, like most pilots, my favorite part of flying is going back to idle with the motor and getting rid of that constant noise behind me and just gliding. It's so peaceful and so beautiful, and I love how the tip steering responds when there's no motor. It's just this nice smooth arc. I just float through my turns. Very, very cool. So I'm looking forward to gaining more altitude so I can spend a little bit more time just gliding through the air. So right now I'm working my way back to the airport. I want to do one of my lands and kind of start the process over. I've been working a little bit on weight transfer here, so you'll see I let go of the toggles and I'm leaning in to kind of get a feel at how that glider responds. I'm not sure if I'm doing it exactly right. I did get a little bit of response from weight transfer, but not quite as much as I was hoping. But it does depend on the wind. Sometimes the wind pulls me. I do notice the torque of the motor definitely shifts me, so I have to do a little weight transfer to counteract that. But the whole process is just learning. It's learning your wing, it's learning your motor, it's learning your skills, it's learning the wind, the environment we're flying in. There's just a lot of things to put together. And what I'm finding is each and every time I fly, I'm getting stronger. my proficiency in all areas is just getting better and better. Now, if you've noticed on my right hand side, I've got a line, the outside cover, the purple for that particular line, has frayed, so you can see the actual line underneath it. And I've had that on a couple of my lines, and I'm not sure if it's getting rubbed somewhere. I know when I broke my prop, one of my brake lines got frayed a little bit, but it just seems to be the outward cover. So I do have orders in to have those replaced. At this point, I feel like it's still secure because I don't think the cover is holding any of the weight. So if you did notice that, that is being addressed, and we will have that taken care of soon. So here's my process of coming in for a landing, and as I said, my spot landing has not been as good as I'd hoped. Here I'm coming in and I end up being well short of where I wanted to land. My goal is to be closer to the white van up there on the left hand side. But I'm committed to the landing at this point, so I'm coming in, trimmer set to slowest setting, pull a little brake, a few steps, and I'm on the ground. I'm trying to walk with the wing, but there's really not enough wind to hold the wing up. So once I realize it's not going to happen, the wing comes down and we unstrap and get ready for our next flight. It's one of those things that comes with time, I'm guessing. There's so many factors when it comes to landing, is the wind. If there's enough wind, if you're coming in slow because of the wind, if there is a crosswind, if there is a wind behind you. But I will get this down all in time. Okay, moving on to flight number 2. Now this time I did adjust my trims all the way to the lowest setting. And we're walking through the process, getting everything in place. Now if you've done this, you know that it can be a little bit awkward. You've got your throttle, for me in my left hand, trying to get my brake toggle lined up. And then you got the A's wrapped around your thumb. There's a lot going on there. Double checking, make sure everything's where it needs to be. Now I want to highlight this particular launch. I didn't get an external video on it, but you'll see I get in the air much quicker. And I believe that's for 2 reasons. One, my trim setting is at the lowest setting, so I'm getting plenty of lift. And 2, I really focus in on my lean back this time. Gas, I give it a little bit of extra throttle here to help me throw that wing up quick. Everything looks good, hands down, and I'm in the air. So this time I was in the air probably about 15, maybe 20 feet earlier than my first flight. And you can see I'm increasing altitude very quickly here. So learning your wing, working on that trim setting, getting that lean back in, trusting that, and even in a no-wind situation, that was a pretty quick launch as far as my skill set goes. So very happy with that, and that's what I'm working on. I think I landed and took off 4 times, and each time, every launch was really, really solid. Now here we're coming in for some semi-low flying. I've got nice grassy fields. One thing I've found though in this area is there's lots of hills, even though they're small. So as soon as I feel like I'm leveling off, I come up on a hill or I'm going over the hill and my altitude changes. But it's all practice, and I feel like each time I'm getting a little bit stronger at this. This is such a beautiful area though. So I guess the best advice is to try to find a big open area like this as you're starting to build those skills of low flying. I feel like I have a ways to go before I feel comfortable getting low enough to where my foot is like dragging through the corn stalks. But I'm definitely getting more confidence controlling the throttle and understanding the wing in this environment. So let's transition over to my landing here. Like once again, we're working on spot landing. Here I'm back at the airport. I've got my area targeted over on the left hand side, so I'm going to pull my tip steer. We're going to do a quick swoop to the left, and we're going to start planning for that spot. Now I leave my wing bag as kind of a reference point, and my goal is to be somewhat close to that. So this particular landing, after you do it 2 or 3 times, there is no wind. I kind of get a better idea on where I need to be. Throttle off, seat out, kill the motor, all that. There I'm out of the harness, just past the runway, feet down, and there we go. Now one thing I did is I turned the wrong way. I was trying to think as I was turning, is it left or right? I haven't yet to do a reverse launch, so obviously I want to make sure I get that down. But everything went well, spun around, the wing came down nice and soft. Very, very happy with that landing. Overall, this was an amazing morning. It was just a week or so ago. I was out for about 4 hours of flying. Here I've got probably an hour and a half to 2 hours of flying in today. And once again, it's just practice. Everything is repetition, going through the process. I'm looking forward to the day where I just launch once and I fly for 2 hours and then I come back and land once. But that time will come. This is really what it's all about. The sunshine in your face, breathing some fresh air, just getting away from people or your normal life. And that's pretty much why we do this, right? I realize this video has little value to an experienced pilot. My focus is, vlogging my own growth in the sport. But hopefully there's something to be offered to new pilots, somebody who's just taken the class, or maybe you took the class a while back and it's been a while since you've flown and you just need to kind of get your mind wrapped around what we're doing again. And I like to think through the processes, just like they taught us in the class, go through each step. I like to, in my own head as I'm flying, you can see I'm constantly looking at both risers, my wing. I'm always analyzing what's going on around me, just to try to become the best I can be. So hopefully this video has some value. There might be other videos down the road if I come up with some new thoughts on what I'm doing, or maybe things that might be of value to other pilots. So I'm going to sign off with a final video my daughters took from inside the van of me landing. I believe it was my last flight.
Landing take 2. Can he do it? We'll have to wait and see. He's coming in. He's actually closer than he appears. Like the mirror, like objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Yes, he's actually way closer than that. Here he comes. Woo! Yeah, I think that was a good landing. Wait, he has to take it. Oh, what? The video's going. That's pretty good. Nice, Dad!